What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski and Nate Bailey back again after we were off last week, week 9. We are back for week 10, recapping everything that happened in college football across the landscape. You know, it's a 5-day-a-week job at this point with Maction coming back this week, Conference USA on the weekdays. But it was a great Saturday slate again. Nate, how was your week?
Pretty good week. It actually ended up not being as bad as I thought. I ended up going 10-10 since Tuesday. Couple spots were interesting. There were definitely some close calls at the end, especially with a couple of the lines. Certainly an exciting week of football for this past week here.
You always start these off saying, not as bad as I thought. And I'm expecting you to come out here with, I don't know, some losses or something. And then it's like, oh, I just didn't win as much money as I thought I was going to. So you didn't actually end up doing anything negative, it sounds like. I ended up 9-4. Not as much volume as I typically play. It was an interesting week. I kind of thought it was a hard one coming in, but profitable on some Conference USA stuff, betting right as the injury report comes out, stuff like that. As far as the marquee games go, it seemed like a little bit of a quiet week. We definitely have a bigger one, especially in the Big Ten coming up this week. But yeah, anything high level you thought about the week before we dive right in? We'll begin with the SEC, of course.
I know we talked about this a little bit over the past few days. It was definitely a hard betting week. I didn't really play as many bets as I thought I was going to after looking at the lines at the beginning of the week. But yeah, again, tough betting spots in a lot of places. There were definitely still some exciting games. This November 1st, Saturday, when we looked at it back in August, it was looking like one of those monumental slates that we were going to remember for years. Certainly did not age incredibly well, but we still got some pretty exciting football out of the weekend, I thought.
Yeah, let's dive right into it. We'll start in the SEC. One thing quick. If you or somebody you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. We certainly will be talking about it, mainly sides and totals. But here are the scores and outcomes for the SEC. If you've never seen this graphic before, basically we just put the scores and then in descending order, the post-game win expectancy, your yards per play, then yards per pass and rush, and how many turnovers you had, just kind of giving you a quick glimpse at what happened and arguably what should have happened based on post-game win expectancy. It was a little bit of a quieter weekend in the SEC. A lot of teams on bye, especially, Alabama and LSU who will meet this week. So the best game on paper certainly was that Vanderbilt-Texas game. We'll start there. Texas gets a 3-point victory, a pretty sound victory. There wasn't really anything in the box score or on the tape that suggested Vanderbilt should have come out and win the game or anything like that. Their real problem was the trenches. Their offensive line couldn't really do anything in the run game. And Isaiah Glass, their left tackle, continues to be a real liability out there. It also affected Pavia. He continues to be under pressure often. It was nearly 50% of his dropbacks in this game. And he still is just the mobility, I don't know, the wizardry. He's able to remove himself from a lot of those pressure situations and kind of hero Vanderbilt in these games. I still think it was pretty positive for them, but overall just outmatched in the trenches against Texas. What'd you see?
One thing I really want to touch on here about this game, by far the best game for Arch Manning so far. 328 yards, 3 touchdowns. Opened the game up with 75-yard touchdown. I know it was a screen. Really good opportunity for him to get his confidence up there at the start of this really big game for Texas, which pretty much from here on out is going to be a must-win every single week. Also didn't take any sacks. I think the offensive line has been one of the worst spots for Texas on the entire team so far this year. And the fact that he's able to be protected a lot better this past week is a pretty bright spot for them. And I think if they continue to protect Arch, I think Texas could end up kind of being back here.
To your point, 6 quarterback pressures all day, by far their best marks. And they were healthy in this game. Like Campbell was a question mark coming in. He got hurt in the previous contest. But everyone was back for that unit. And maybe this is the best version of Texas offensive line. Remember, they were replacing 4 starters after last year. They had 4 guys leave and go to the NFL. They didn't go to the portal. They didn't go out and add these experienced players from other teams. They just stood on their depth, and it's elite depth. They're young, 4 and 5 stars, but it's just that when you have 4 and 5 stars across the line, development should be expected to some degree. And then that defensive line is it's just better than Vanderbilt's offensive line. And nothing really else stood out to me. There were a couple injuries I just want to highlight. First of all, Michael Toff is going to be back next week. They're All-American safety. Jelani McDonald did go down in this game, as well as Ryan Wingo. Wingo's a weird situation. He had a thumb injury, but it appears he's not going to miss any time, they say. I don't know. Thumb injury for a receiver kind of scares me a little bit. But yeah, to your point on Texas moving forward, you've got a big game against Georgia, and then you close the year against A&M. Anything on Vandy, though, before we move on?
I think it's been a fun season for them. Again, nothing really else stuck out to me in this game other than, again, Texas being able to protect Arch a lot better. But Vandy's been competitive. They definitely overachieved. But yeah, overall, just a fun 11 a.m. game for this one here.
So Vandy's got 2 losses. Their schedule is about as easy as it comes in the SEC: Auburn, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And obviously, there's no easy SEC schedule, but there's a pretty good chance this team finishes with 2 losses, which could make things interesting. But second game, not really as much at stake because of the state of Florida, but they drop a game to Georgia here. It was a close one, 24-20, and this is just the state of the SEC right now. Florida has a fired coach. They've had a disappointing season, including a loss to USF, but this is still a team that's recruited at the top 12 rate the last 3 years. They have really good players, and they're going to make some of these games close. They still dropped this game. Georgia finished with a 74% post-game win expectancy. There wasn't anything too crazy in this contest either from what I saw. Florida had a turnover on down at the Georgia 18 while they were up by 3. That was very late in the game. Other than that, there wasn't too much. Georgia did throw an interception at their own 29, giving Florida a field goal. But other than that, Georgia came away with a couple injuries, some players to watch next week. Jordan Hall at defensive tackle, Chris Cole at linebacker, DeMello Jones at defensive back. But ultimately, I think we just got Georgia was the better team. They were able to withstand some of the slight noise in the game, and they get a rightful win here. What'd you see?
So interesting spot here. Looking at this line throughout this week, it being 7.5 for the most part. I stayed away for most of the week. I ended up betting them live when they were down on the money line. 7.5 is tough because, again, for the most part, you're going to get a pretty competitive game here, no matter how bad Florida might have been this year. But I was happy with that result there. Georgia has been continuing to come from behind every single time for these past few weeks here. And again, that's fine. I mean, great teams find ways to win close games like that. There's no question. I did think it was pretty funny when Gunnar Stockton took a knee there at the 1 yard line to blow the cover, though. That was pretty funny.
Not for you, apparently. That nice play on that money line live.
Yeah.
But yes, that was funny. And props to Gunnar Stockton for his situational awareness. But yeah, to your point, this Georgia team has lived dangerously a lot this year. When they played Tennessee, they came away with a 24% post-game win expectancy when they probably should have lost. Alabama was the exact opposite. They had an 80% post-game win expectancy in a game they took an L in. The Auburn game, even they only had a 54% post-game win expectancy. So, and then Ole Miss, of course, that crazy shootout where the only drive they didn't have with a touchdown was, or a score, I should say, was the final drive of the game when they were salting it away. But yeah, every game you play in the SEC is going to be close now. And to close out the year, kind of a tough game against Georgia Tech to close. They're going to have a chance to right that ship after last year's shootout. But then they've got Texas in 2 weeks. That's the biggest one they have left. In between then, Mississippi State and a non-con against Charlotte. On the other side, anything for Florida, this team's just running out of the clock.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they're still going to – I do think they're going to still play some competitive games here going forward. I actually was still impressed with their effort yesterday. But yeah, they obviously have no shot left in this conference at all.
They're just so hurt. They just lost Dallas Wilson for the year. I guess silver lining there. He only played 4 games, so he's going to be able to redshirt. Not that it really matters. He's probably going to go to the NFL before he maximizes that time he could use in college. But they've lost 3 of their top 4 receivers at this point. And their defensive backs are battered. Early in the year was the defensive line. And for them, you finish with Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Florida State. So nothing's getting easier for them. Other games, another slightly, I guess it was a pretty decent game overall. Oklahoma, Tennessee, not as many postseason implications here, but Oklahoma does get a win 33-27. 70% post-game win expectancy. It was mostly a turnover-filled contest. There was a lot of back and forth there. Oklahoma had 11 penalties in the game. Tennessee only had 3. But one of the touchdowns scored for Oklahoma was a strip sack on Aguilar that got returned for a crazy touchdown. I don't know how he actually got in the end zone on that. But then there were some missed field goals. Oklahoma missed one from the 37. They threw an interception at their own 36. They threw an interception at their own 34. And still, they were able to come away with a victory, which was pretty surprising. That's why they lost. I got Tennessee and Oklahoma mixed up there. All of those errors that I just mentioned were Tennessee stuff. Oklahoma wasn't that pretty either, though. They fumbled at the Tennessee 24, and then they threw an interception at the Tennessee 35. Other stuff in the game, stud edge rusher R. Mason Thomas did get injured for Oklahoma. Kind of the same thing on the Tennessee side, though. Their best edge rusher, Joshua Josephs, went down in the game. But it kind of just looked like Aguilar was out there trying to be a hero by himself. It's a game where Tennessee didn't really run the ball well, 1.8 yards per carry as a team. When you do that and you have 3 turnovers, it's just going to hard to win those games. What do you think in this one?
This was actually one of my losses this week. I had Tennessee spread at -3. Yeah, Aguilar could not get much going here. Not really a particularly great game for each quarterback. Mateer wasn't super impressive either. But to your point on the run game, Bishop's had a great last month here. He only had 38 yards on the ground all night. So you can't establish a run game there. I kind of knew they were going to be in trouble. And then Oklahoma ended up getting a tough win on the road here.
Definitely did. And it's always going to be tough playing that Oklahoma defensive line with Stone. And even though R. Mason Thomas did go down, we'll see on his status moving forward. They have a lot of depth, man. It's just, there are not going to be that many defensive lines that look like Oklahoma's opposite you. And to your point, the month prior, they'd played Arkansas, Alabama, who's really struggled in the trenches, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. So basically, you played the bottom 3 teams in the conference and Alabama. So yeah, it's going to be tougher here the rest of the way for Tennessee. You still have Florida and Vanderbilt on deck, so this team's definitely not dead. Their schedule's relatively easy by SEC standards, always with that caveat. But I think it's still probably going to be tough for them. They're just a limited team. At some point, I think they're going to get back Jermod McCoy. He's back at practice. Now, he's their best corner. Their secondary's been a disaster without him. I don't know what happens if they catch an L and this team is like completely eliminated, because they're hanging on by a thread here. I think they're probably already out, but they would need some chaos to help them. I'm just not sure what Tennessee really has to play for left this season with a guy like Jermod McCoy. Oklahoma still kind of alive. They're one of these 2-loss teams in the SEC. They need some chaos, not as much as Tennessee, but just think it's going to be pretty hard for them moving forward too. They're a limited team. They don't have the pass game to stand up to a lot of these teams. They have a young offensive line, lower level compared to some other SEC teams. I think they're just kind of working at a talent deficit when you actually face the top teams in the conference. Anything moving forward on either of them?
Yeah, I think every 2-loss team certainly still alive here in the SEC. One other thing, I know the playoff rankings will come out on Tuesday, but we have 9 SEC teams ranked in the top 25 this week. 9.
I don't look at the rankings, as you guys know. Off the top of my head, that doesn't really bother me.
No, it doesn't bother me either.
You need to have not you specifically, but like people need to think like, what are these rankings trying to achieve? Are you trying to put the best 25 teams in the country on this list, or are you just trying to do the ones with the 25 best records? So I know a lot of people have beef with this stuff. The SEC is still the best conference. I know that's going to be a hot take. It shouldn't be. The Big Ten is the best team, probably the best 2 teams. But top to bottom, this is still the best league, where your least competitive team, like let's say it's Kentucky or Arkansas, they're going to give your best team a game. Unlike the Big Ten, where Wisconsin is going to lose by 45 points to Indiana or Ohio State. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. A couple other games in this conference. South Carolina played Ole Miss. They kind of got their doors blown in. Not too much to see there. That team is just very limited comparatively. Do you have anything in that game or any of the other SEC contests? Otherwise, let's just open this up to any futures, stuff like that, playoff, whatever you want to get to.
Yeah, I had the over in the Ole Miss game, so I was a little disappointed about that. They didn't look crazy impressive. It did help that they did force 3 turnovers for South Carolina. But another monster game for Kejuan Lacey. Ole Miss should win out. I'm looking at that Egg Bowl game there at the end of the year, which should be interesting. I think Mississippi State's a pretty competitive team this year, much improved. But yeah, nothing else really on my end from there.
Yeah, Mississippi State got a big SEC win against Arkansas. It seems like that game every year decides the win total for one of those teams.
I did bet Mississippi State +5 there.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Get an outright win.
That
Yeah,
was
if there's
a good
anything,
bet.
I didn't have any bets in the SEC this week. So if you have any others, feel free to mention those. I'm going to get into some playoff and future stuff quick. We have A&M still undefeated, both in conference and the season. The only other undefeated team in SEC play is Bama. So right now, those two teams, they control their own destiny. Obviously, they're not both going to finish undefeated because you got a head-to-head coming up. But from there, you have some one-loss teams. Excuse me, they don't play a head-to-head. I think it's Texas who plays the head-to-head against A&M. That's the final game of the year for them, if I'm not mistaken. But otherwise, your one-loss teams in conference, Georgia and Ole Miss both firmly still in it. Texas is 4-1 in conference. They're very much still in it too. And then the chaos teams, your two losers are Oklahoma, Vandy, Missouri. I could see maybe placing a future on one of the one-loss teams. I already have some A&M tickets to win the SEC, so I'm probably not going to actually take any of them. But I'm pretty much out on these two loss teams. I don't think they really have a path. It's just going to be a very uphill battle. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually haven't really played any playoff futures in the SEC yet. Although I did have Tennessee last night, I actually, going back and looking at everything, I was still happy with the outcome from a futures perspective because I do have Oklahoma's win total. So that should hopefully come through. Their schedule's not the easiest, but in terms of futures, that's the only one I have right now in the SEC.
Yeah, I'm going to leave my A&M. I bet two teams to win the SEC preseason, A&M and Bama. I'm going to leave that alone. There's actually a chance they play each other in that game without the head-to-head. To be clear, that head-to-head is game. Texas A&M, Texas on November 28th. Let's go to the Big Ten. Bad week in the Big Ten. They just don't have a lot of competitive games these days. That will be this week. I realize these say week 7 too. Has this been week 7 every week? Have I just completely ignored that part of this? Anyway.
That's funny. I literally just noticed that myself here.
Apparently, as you guys know, if you've watched the show, I can't read. But anyway, the best game was USC and Nebraska, and that one finished closer probably than it should have been, 21-17. The post-game win expectancy was 70% in favor of USC. Nebraska has just struggled against the high-end teams for years now. This is not a new thing. I think there's some crazy stat out there about Matt Rule being something, or it's not him, it's Nebraska being 0-30 against their last 30 ranked opponents. So they lose Raiola in the game. That was the biggest storyline coming out. This Nebraska team is dead for anything postseason at this point. USC is still very much alive, and their offense struggled a little bit today, but somehow they still got the run game going, especially with King Miller on the ground, third-string running back, so that's positive to see. Nebraska does not have the horses to beat USC. To beat USC, you need to have the high-powered offensive line and defensive line and win through the trenches. Teams that can overpower USC there can win. Anything you saw in this game?
Yeah, certainly tough for Nebraska losing Raiola for the year. This was probably, to me, their most impressive win. Still a come from behind W here, though. They were down 14-6 in the third quarter. Nothing really stuck out from the scoreboard here. I mean, again, kind of a slow game, but still a competitive game here. But yeah, USC, tough win. They don't have the easiest schedule going forward here. I know they still have Iowa on their schedule, which is no gimme, even though that's at their house. But yeah, important win, if anything, here for the Trojans.
Yeah, I thought so too. I didn't really take too much away from this game. You're going to play harder games down the stretch. Another one that I had, my first bet that we'll talk about here was Indiana. They absolutely smashed Maryland so badly that, we have Maryland firing their head coach now. I didn't really take too much away from this. The one major takeaway, I think, is a personnel thing. Elijah Surratt sustained a hamstring injury. He's their number one receiver. If he's out for any length of time, that would put some stress on this team. One of the big takeaways we had last week was love Indiana, amazing roster. The issue is depth. So if they need to start tapping into that, I love Omar Cooper. They just don't have a lot else. That's my biggest worry with this team moving forward. And honestly, on Maryland, I didn't think they played that bad throughout the year. My expectations were honestly lower. So to see them fire the coach was a bit surprising. Anything for you on this game?
So it's interesting. I actually bet Indiana minus 21 here. Not the best game for Mendoza so far this season. But one thing that really stuck out for me with Indiana, what they were able to do on the ground, 367 yards on the ground. That's a huge talking point here because even when Mendoza doesn't have his best game, they were able to attack you in the run game here. So I think that's really important. That just shows the kind of team Indiana is right now. I think they're more than deserving of number 2 right now. I think if you do look at the rankings again, they don't tell you everything, but I really do think right now it's Ohio State. I think it's Indiana, and I do think there's a slight gap between everyone else here.
Yeah, I think you could certainly make that argument. I have no qualms with that. You mentioned the total yardage, 7.1 yards per carry. Per carry, that's nearly a first down every time they ran the ball, which is still bananas. And for Mendoza not having his best game, still 9.6 yards per attempt. That's nearly a first down every time he threw a pass. And to your point, Carter Smith, their left tackle, I mean, he's playing at an All-American level. And then you really don't have a weak link. It's probably like a Bray Lynch if you had to pick one. But you have legitimately 4 players in this offensive line that are probably going to vie for some sort of all-conference honors. I don't know who will actually finish with them, but Carter Smith, Pat Coogan, the Notre Dame transfer, Khalil Benson, he's been in college since maybe you, and then Drew Evans. You've got a great offensive line for this team. Plus, running backs that work in all situations like a Roman Hemby coming over from Maryland. The guy's like 100 catches in his career. On defense, no real issues still. Aiden Fisher missed the game, but he should be back at some point. Kellen Wyatt looks like he's going to be out for the year. So you need to tap into a little depth with some of these players, but overall they've still been fairly healthy, but that's going to be the biggest key for them. Ohio State beat down Penn State. That was a 38-14 game. Michigan squeaked out a victory over Purdue, 21-16. That one should have been wider, 95% post game for Michigan. The big story there is it looks like their starting running back's actually going to have surgery to fix that broken foot. Ohio State's on an absolute warpath. The only thing was really the downs targeting that I saw, but Ohio State just needs to basically run out the clock until they get to the postseason before you really see some competitive games for them, or maybe Michigan will give it to them. Anything else with the rest of the Big Ten?
Yeah, great game for Sand, 316 yards to the air with 4 touchdowns. That 2-headed monster receiver for Ohio State's just an absolute matchup nightmare for anyone they're going to play going forward here. Michigan, Purdue, Bryce Underwood has 7 touchdown passes so far this year. What are your thoughts on his performance so far this season?
His receivers have, last I checked, so coming into last week, it was a top 5 drop rate in the country.
Mm-hmm.
The box score is not going to tell you everything. Bryce Underwood is definitely limited, and that should have been the expectation. He's a freshman. Very rare for even a 5-star freshman to come in and light the world on fire. He's certainly been an upgrade from their quarterback situation last year, but it's hard to isolate his play from all the drops. Like Samaj Morgan has been an absolute, utter disaster out there. Now, they've kind of reduced his playing time in favor of their 4-star freshman receiver, Andrew Marsh, which phenomenal. Should have been done in week 1. But, you know, like Max Bredesen is still getting too many snaps. He's dropping passes all over the place. He's like their H-back. I don't know why they use him. Samaj Morgan should flat out not be on the field. So Michigan has a ways to go. I don't think it's all Bryce Underwood's fault. So that's the only thing I would add to the situation to kind of color it a little bit. I think he's been okay. Probably not what you expected.
One other thing with Indiana, from a betting perspective here for the Hoosiers, right? We look at these huge spreads. Like, for example, this past game here, closing at 21.5, right? One thing that I love about Indiana right now, especially in these big spreads, they finish games. We've had teams like Penn State the past couple of years who've had super dominant seasons, but have had these 30, 40-point spreads that you just couldn't touch because they would lose motivation at the end. So one thing for me, I will probably continue to bet Indiana if they do have these large lines because Cignetti just gets them to finish games every single time, and that's been really fun to watch here so far.
Yeah, they're 14-point favorite this week. That's going to go through 14. I can almost guarantee it against Penn State, who they should cover that spread, to your point. The only games they don't really cover spreads when they got backdoored by Michigan State on I don't know what it was, the backup quarterback.
Oh, that was crazy.
And then when they had the intentional safety. Those are the
Iowa,
only two backdoors I can remember. But yeah, to your point on Signetti, that guy is a real prick in a good way. He's pissed off at everybody all the time. And I don't think he's trying to cover spreads. I think he just wants like no plays off, maximum effort, execution on every play, which is, you should expect that. He takes it to another level, though.
They finish games. It's awesome. It's great. It's phenomenal coaching right now.
It is. This conference is weird. Obviously, Indiana, Ohio State, undefeated, both in conference and out. So driver's seat for the championship. They do not play each other. So Indiana has a really easy schedule. There's a good chance they are undefeated coming out of this, and Ohio State will play Michigan, obviously. But behind them, if chaos is going to happen, your one-loss Big Ten teams are still Michigan somehow, Iowa, who we'll get to, Oregon, USC. Your chaos teams, your two losers are Minnesota, Northwestern, UCLA, Washington. In this conference, they're all probably dead just because the conference itself has so many weaklings, and a couple of these teams with none or one loss have really easy schedules the rest of the way. It's not likely you end up with multiple teams dropping enough games for it to open up the door for the two losses already. What do you think moving forward for this conference? Do you think Indiana and Ohio State will meet in the Big Ten championship?
Well, two are certainly in the driver's seat right now. Ohio State, they just got to finish and take care of business against Michigan. Ryan Day just seems to forget how to coach whenever it comes to that big game right there. So I certainly do think it should be those two. Just by the way they're playing, they're just two well-oiled machines right now. So if it was my choice right now, I definitely think that it's going to be those two right now. But I was taking a peek at the tiebreakers. And I know I am an Iowa fan. I try to keep everything to a minimum here with that. But if Ohio State loses to Michigan and Iowa wins out, they get the bid, and then it's a rematch with Indiana in the championship.
And Big Ten or not, Big Ten championship or not, Big Ten's probably putting in 3 teams.
Yeah.
So there are some instances where you might not want it. This is an argument that I don't like having because we shouldn't have to have it, but we do. Sometimes a conference championship loss could hurt you more than help you, hypothetically. So Iowa or Michigan or Oregon, who's an amazing team, USC, if they end up being a team that wins out, having a chance to sit at home for an extra week, yeah, you won't get a bye, but you get to rest, and you can't really hurt yourself is the big thing if you don't play in that Big Ten championship. So yeah, it's definitely there for Iowa. I think they have the toughest schedule of these teams that remain. I mean, it's pretty tough for them.
One team that's probably in a good spot is Oregon, because if they do win out and then Ohio State wins out, Indiana wins out, they don't have to play in that conference championship game.
And they could put 4 teams, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I think they'll get 4. Right now, the way it's shaping up, I think they might get 4.
We'll get to some of these other conferences that might spoil something because there's definitely a chance they will. Ideally, for me, it's 4 bids, SEC, 4 bids for Big Ten. Probably won't play out like that because it looks like if Notre Dame wins out, they'll be in. You got your G5, that leaves 2 spots left. Well, you have to give 1 to ACC and Big 12 for sure. But let's go to the Big 12 now. Good chance you come out of this with 2 viable candidates. One of them certainly will be Texas Tech, who just put the beat down on Kansas State, largely through turnovers, man. Kansas State turned the ball over 5 times in this game. That's how you get to a score of 43-20. This was a just nightmare game for Kansas State. Not the best game for Texas Tech overall from an offensive perspective. You had Baron Morton still below 7.8 yards per carry. But when your defense plays like that, it doesn't really matter too much. What did you see in this contest?
So I was actually concerned about Texas Tech going into this game. I thought it could have been a possible look-ahead spot with BYU on the schedule next week. But really impressive win. Really good to see Baron Morton back and continue to get healthier and healthier as he had that injury a couple weeks ago. 5 turnovers for that defense is awesome. Kansas State definitely underachievers this year. They were actually one of my favorites at the beginning of the year to maybe even make a run in the Big 12 to win the whole thing in that conference this year. But yeah, good one for Texas Tech. Again, with the really big game coming up next week against BYU.
They're getting a little hurt. Skylar Gill-Howard's down, our favorite Milwaukee native. But Lee Hunter also played. This was a weird week for me with the YouTube TV stuff and some stuff in my personal life. I didn't get eyes on as many games as I wanted to. So I didn't see like why he played so few snaps compared to normal. So that'll be something I have to look at throughout the week. But just a note there on the defensive line for Texas Tech. That game against BYU might be the game of the week. It's one I'm super excited for, but it's definitely going to be tough. Otherwise, Cincinnati, they dropped a game to Utah. That one should have been closer than 45-14. Utah comes away with a 91% post-game win expectancy, but Cincinnati outgained them by more than a full yard per play. A full yard, which was very surprising to me. They were at 6.8 to 5.7 for Utah. It came down to turnovers. You had 3 of them for Cincinnati and only 2 of them for Utah, and they were pretty concerning, some of them as well. Not only that, they missed a field goal. One of their fumbles was on the Utah 24-yard line, so going in to score. They had an interception at their own 25. So you do some of those things, it's just going to be hard to win games. In addition to having 8 penalties for 60 yards, they doubled up Utah on penalty yards. And one big takeaway from this game, it was probably the biggest mismatch in the contest. Utah's using those 6 offensive linemen almost every play. They did it over 50% of the time in this game. And Cincinnati, they play a 3-4 defense. They love just lining up Corleone as this lone nose guard and then having kind of like your 2 stand-up 5 techniques on the edge. You can't do that if you're facing 6 offensive linemen every single play. And then Dante Corleone only played 34 of 87 snaps. He's the only good nose tackle they have on the team. So aside from the turnovers, it seemed like it was going to be an uphill battle for them in this contest, and that's exactly what happened. Just a really hard stylistic game for their defense against Utah. What'd you see here?
I bet Cincinnati plus 10.5. So this was on my locks.
So did I. I got suckered into that.
I got excited. I was really looking forward to this game going into the week. But I think a late game for Cincinnati. I know it doesn't mean everything, but this is a 10 o'clock game for them going out there. It's a tough environment to play at.
One of the hardest stadiums, one of the best home fields in the country.
Yeah. Good game from Dampier. Better game from Dampier there. Utah staying alive in the Big 12 now. This conference is as crazy as anything that we'll see. And the road ahead in this conference is going to be just nuts.
Yeah, this conference isn't as talented as the Big 2, but it is really exciting. Like, these are some awesome games to watch. They're a lot of fun. The West Virginia-Houston game, that is your greasy game that ended up being an exciting shootout. I mean, my goodness. And West Virginia upsets Houston. They only had a 30% chance to win. So I am sorry, Houston fans. That really stinks that you came out of this game with a loss. The reason you lost, 4 turnovers. West Virginia had 0. You just can't have that margin and expect to win games. Connor Wegman fumbled on his own 40. That was a West Virginia touchdown the next drive. He threw an interception on his own 38, gave him a field goal, threw a pick 6, and they were on the 22 going into score when he did that. Not to mention, the last one didn't really count. It was at the end of the game, but they also muffed a punt. The other thing, Wegman, man, his presence in the pocket is so weak. 5 sacks on 10 pressures. That's a 50% pressure to sack ratio. That's pretty bad. The offensive line didn't even have a bad game. And the other thing that was weird, that West Virginia team, who's starting a 4th-string quarterback, their offensive line has been horrible this year. They only gave up 4 pressures all game. I'm not really sure what to think about Houston right now, but it sort of seems like they were just sleepwalking in because it wasn't just Wegman. Your defensive line generates 4 pressures in what should be a monumental mismatch. I just don't know what happened, man.
Yeah, if you lose a turnover battle 4-0, it's going to be really hard to win a football game here. West Virginia, I mean, they also came out hot. They started out 14-0 here. And again, I know they lost that game last week, but to me, looking at this team, it looks like they are starting to play a little bit more competitive football here under Rich Rod. It really does.
I thought this team was going to get blown out. And the reason, everyone on their team is hurt. 4th-string quarterback. You lost your all-conference running back, Jaheim White, your best receiver, Jaden Bray's out. There's a slew of injuries on the offensive line and defense. They're playing basically with a talent roster equivalent of what Rich Rod had at Jacksonville State. So that was why it was surprising to me. But you force 4 turnovers, some of them Wegman's fault, some of them just credit to your defense. You're going to win games. Arizona State, Iowa State, this was another weird result. Arizona State wins a game, also extremely injured. Jeff Sims starts the contest. As much as Jeff Sims, I'll be kind, he's limited, but he also is a former four-star with a lot of starts. This guy has been in college since the COVID season. He started for Georgia Tech, and he can't throw the ball. We know this. He's one of these quarterbacks that is extremely mobile, never developed as a passer. However, if you're going to surround him with a reasonable amount of talent and not ask him to drop back 40 times in the game, you can win. And especially when the opposing team, Iowa State, will allow you to run for 228 yards. Jeff Sims had an 80-yard touchdown in this game. And Arizona State didn't play clean at all. They had 11 penalties. They had 3 turnovers. They still won this game because of Iowa State's ineptitude, largely on defense. Now, they're extremely hurt. Their 3 best players in the secondary are out. Dominique Orange has been banged up for multiple games now. They're walking wounded. So I think a lot of people are going to come out of this contest and be like, wow, Arizona State really overcame the injuries. And people know them because it's like, okay, Jordan Tyson, NFL receiver, Sam Levitt, probably NFL quarterback someday are hurt. Iowa State has just as many injuries. They're just not to positions that have the name recognition. Anything here?
Yeah, I mean, losing Levitt for the year, it's going to be really hard for them to be competitive. But 228 yards from Jeff Sims on the ground. That's a school record for quarterbacks for Arizona State. So, yeah, I know we've certainly had our conversations of the performance of Jeff Sims over the years, especially since the COVID year. But it was a nice, impressive win for them. But yeah, Iowa State kind of just been unlucky with injuries this year. I was pretty high on them in the preseason to be pretty competitive in this conference, but it's probably going to be a tough road ahead here for the Cyclones.
Yeah, Benjamin Brahmer, their 6'7" tight end, to get taken to the hospital after this game. Football's a brutal game, man. Football's a brutal game. Anything else in the Big 12? I didn't include some of the lesser games on here, like Colorado at a contest. Anything you want to get to from the depths?
Oh, yeah. So for Colorado, they had this team had 14 penalties for 110 yards. Colorado actually played 4 quarterbacks in the game, and they threw 3 picks collectively. So it was an absolute nightmare for them. Great game for Fafita. He had 8.5 yards per pass compared to 14.9 for Colorado. He also had 4 touchdowns through the air. Impressive win for Arizona, but it's really hard to keep interest in this Colorado team. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, the drama is probably the most interesting part in whether they fire Pat Shurmur or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for me. The only games I bet were Texas Tech, and then I had Cincinnati as well as the over in the Cincinnati game. That one did come through.
Yeah.
But moving forward, this conference is so interesting because you have the game of the year this week, BYU and Texas Tech. I hope it's not on ESPN or ABC or they resolve that dispute. Otherwise, I'm going to have to head to the bar to watch it or something again.
Oh, it's on ABC.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Looks like I'm going.
I'm right there with you, though. I'm right there with you.
Looks like I'm going for some wings or something. But anyway, Cincinnati still has 1 loss. So despite their loss to Utah right there, and this conference, if you have 2 losses, you're definitely live. Those teams include Houston, Utah, Arizona State, and TCU. They're dropping games to each other left and right. I don't have a lot of long shots. My team in the preseason was Texas Tech, so riding with that. My team to, fade, I guess, was BYU, so that's not looking good. I have under 8.5 their win total. They're certainly going to eclipse that. For a long shot, I think the best teams that have 2 losses are Utah, and I keep putting money on TCU at various points. They're the best recruiting team in this conference. Haven't put it all together, and a lot of it has been turnover-worthy plays from Josh Hoover. So I'm tentatively interested in TCU rest of the way. I don't know if I can pull the trigger on like a playoff or even a conference future. What about you?
I got one future in the Big 12. I have Utah to win. So it's not incredibly dead yet. So there's still a lot of time left. But yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I'm probably not going to play anything else. I'm probably going to just sit back and let that ride. But yeah, should be an interesting last few weeks of the year here in the Big 12.
One of the reasons I'm interested in TCU, and I'm going to look up a price after this, close with Iowa State, BYU, Houston, Cincinnati. They have 3 head-to-heads against teams ahead of them. Mm-hmm. 3. Now, they're probably not going to win them all, but TCU is going to ruin one of these teams' season, almost without a doubt. Too talented not to. Anything else here?
No, nothing really else for me here.
All right, let's go to whatever the ACC was trying to do this weekend. Where do you want to start, man? I mean, there's so much to get to.
Let's start with some Duke Clemson.
All right, I'll just give you the briefs. What happened? Duke wins on a 2-point conversion, 46-45. They had a 6% post-game win expectancy. Yes, you heard me. They won with a 6% post-game win expectancy. Soundly outgained in this game. Clemson averaged over a first down every time they passed. They were nearly at 5 yards per carry. Take it away, man. What in the world is going on with Clemson?
Well, I loved how they overhit in the first half. That was awesome.
I did have that as well. That was wild.
Dabo continues to get outcoached every week. I do love the decision by Duke to go for 2 at the end there. I think that's awesome when you're on the road. They obviously had momentum at that time. So I think that was a great decision by Diaz. Turnovers, 1-0. It was a pretty clean game from that point there. Both teams did have a lot of penalties. Duke had 9, Clemson had 8. Duke again also blocked a punt. Really disappointing performance from Clemson's defense, especially from the interior line.
Agreed on the penalties. It was a sloppy game for sure. Some of them you could argue were pretty poor. I know there were a lot of people up in arms about the penalty that really allowed Duke to be in position to score at the end of the game and then subsequently get the 2-point conversion. So I get it. At the end of the day, you need to execute as well. On that final touchdown, you have the running back running into the flat, catches it, and the player defending him in coverage was defensive tackle Peter Woods.
There's no excuse.
I'm not in the weeds, X's and O's as much as some people here, but even I know that's probably not the matchup you want in that situation. So it's happened multiple times to your point, Dabo. Clemson's 3-5 now. They need to go 3-1 to make a bowl game. There's a really good chance this team is done in November. And Duke, I like this Duke team if they wouldn't. This was one of the games without turnovers, and it's funny how this Duke team can actually score points when they don't turn the ball over. I actually like Duke a lot. Clemson, I don't think I can get there. They've routinely underachieved given their talent.
Mensah had a phenomenal game too, 361-4.
He's got great receivers. Barcade's having an excellent year. We saw some glimpses of Angelo Anthony. He's been playing. And Samir Higgins, I believe he caught the game-winning touchdown or game-tying touchdown, it should have been. And their run game is alive with Nate Shepard, the 4-star freshman. The offense is dynamic. Their problem is they can't stop anything on defense. Similar to the Jermod McCoy situation for Tennessee. I don't know if they're going to get back Terry Moore at any point this season. He's coming off the late season ACL last year. Maybe we see him at some point. That would definitely help, but they're kind of just going to be treading water and have to win these shootouts. The most interesting game to me, result-wise, was Georgia Tech finally dropping a game. And I say finally because they had 2 previous contests below a 50% post-game win expectancy. They do that here, 15%, and they actually catch an L against NC State, who's a quality team. They're definitely not near the top of this conference, but you get beat by 12. Your yards per play, you lose that soundly. NC State averaged the first time every time they threw the pass, but more importantly, with their backup running back, 7.1 yards per carry against Georgia Tech. This GT defense was the problem with the team last year. They hired a new DC to try to fix it. It appears to still be an enormous problem in this game and moving forward. What did you see from this contest?
Great game, both sides of quarterbacks here. Haynes King, 408 yards through the air. CJ Bailey, 340. Certainly a shootout. I kind of knew coming along here, Georgia Tech was going to drop one eventually. They're obviously still fine in the conference with as erratic as it is. But I do think they can clean it up. They need to clean this defense up a lot here. But they're certainly still alive. You drop one, but they were still in a pretty good position going into this game anyway.
Their only tough conference game, and I say that specifically because they played Georgia, which is a semi-meaningless game. To get in the playoff from the ACC, you need to win the conference. That's at least the best way you control your own destiny that way. They finish with Boston College and Pitt. Pitt's going to be a tougher game. Then you got Georgia and non-con to close the year. So most of the hay is in the barn for Georgia Tech, if you will. NC State dead, but a fun team playing spoiler to other teams in this conference. Another weird result was Miami and SMU. Miami loses by 6. Rightful loss. SMU finishes with a 61% post-game win expectancy. Yards per play did slightly favor Miami, And it was kind of a weird game altogether. SMU averaged under 1 yard per carry. Yes, you heard me right. And this team is ranked like 126th in rushing efficiency, so shouldn't be super surprising against that Miami D-line. But Miami got cooked through the air, 8.1 yards per attempt for Kevin Jennings in this game. You get the Carson Beck mental lapses once in a while, and that's what's derailed Miami's season to this point. Anything you saw here?
Turnover certainly going to hurt you here. 2 interceptions from Beck was not great. We also can't forget 12 penalties for 96 yards from Miami. I mean, it's not good, dude. It's another November meltdown for Cristobal here.
They've had a lot of penalties this year, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they didn't control their own destiny going into yesterday. They certainly don't control it now. The rest of their schedule is easy, but at this point, I don't think we can really be assuming Miami wins all these games the way they played. So yeah, I'm out on the Hurricanes moving forward. Just no real path in my opinion. Virginia kind of got a little bit of a scare. This was a game I did bet and got extremely lucky with Virginia scoring at the 11th hour to give a cover against Cal, an unnecessary score too. So, don't let me come on here and complain about bad beats when I need to acknowledge when you get lucky as well. Definitely did there. They were still the rightful winner, 77% post-game, 5.7 yards per play to 4.6 for Cal. Did a really good job against Cal's run game. They averaged 0.3 yards per carry. That one's not a joke either. 0.3, that's even worse than SMU. Unbelievable how bad they were. You get the 2 turnovers, and Virginia kind of cruises to a sleepy win. Anything here or in the rest of the ACC?
Yeah, great game for Jamari Taylor for Virginia. 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. I haven't been super high on this team all year. They've been getting good wins. Nothing super impressive throughout this entire game otherwise, but their schedule is pretty favorable the rest of the way. So we should be seeing them in that championship game come December.
This was a team I was pretty high on to begin the season, just with how much money they spent. Evidenced not only by their quarterback, Chandler Morris, but you go out and you get like Charles Harris, added a ton on the offensive line. Unfortunately, a lot of it's gotten hurt, but this was a big spender in a conference that doesn't always spend a lot of money on football. To your point, Virginia in the driver's seat. They are undefeated in conference. And yes, you might see an NC State loss on their schedule if you look it up. That was a non-con game because of some realignment stuff. So they're 8-1 overall with a non-conference loss to a conference opponent. It's like, my goodness, college football, you can't make this stuff up. 1-loss teams include Georgia Tech. We mentioned them the rest of the way. Pretty easy road. Pitt is 5-1. The big head-to-head is there. You have Louisville at 4-1, SMU at 4-1, Duke at 4-1. Duke does have a head-to-head against Virginia to close this out. So some of this will be decided, but there are a ton of teams sitting at 4-1 right now, 5-1. Virginia is the only undefeated team in conference. Do you have a sleeper here?
I would not leave SMU out of the equation here at all.
They've been really hurt. And the games they've dropped were not entirely due to injury, but the Wake Forest game, they had 3 starting offensive linemen go down. They didn't have Robertson on the edge, 2 starters in the secondary. A lot of those guys returned in their last contest. I love SMU. They've really underachieved, and I can't come out and say in good faith I know why. But yeah, man, I like that team. I think everything's in front of them. Look up who they played the rest of the way. I was going to say Louisville, but then I just pulled up their schedule and I see Cal, Clemson, SMU, and Kentucky. So it appears that SMU Louisville game probably is going to be maybe one of the better ones on that November 22nd weekend. Do you have the SMU schedule?
I'm pulling it up right now. Much improved game this week for Kevin Jennings too.
That's good. They need it. Oh, they only have 3 games left. BC, Cal, and Louisville. That Louisville game is huge.
For SMU.
Yeah.
That Louisville game is massive. And, people can say what they want about the ACC, but you know what? It's giving us some really exciting football here down the stretch.
Yeah, I want to pull my hair out because of what I do betting, but
it's been really – we've had some good spots this year, but it's been really hard to bet.
Okay, last question on this conference before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Can Pitt do enough against Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Miami to make some noise here? I think they're going to get blasted the rest of the way.
Yeah, they'll have to. I mean, I think they will. If they won all those games, though, it's definitely up in the air.
That team is.
I think they're going to be more competitive against Notre Dame than other people think. I really do.
That would be a huge head-to-head because everyone's just putting Notre Dame in. But yeah, really fun contest. Just looking at these
Mm-hmm.
schedules, ACC is going to be fireworks the rest of the way. Let's do our little G5 check-in.
Yep.
The American was a lot of fun this week. A game I didn't hear a lot of people talking about, Navy, North Texas. North Texas is quietly in the driver's seat of this conference now. They get a big win over Navy, who was undefeated coming into the game, 31-17. They did it largely through the air, and Navy had 3 turnovers. So that's going to be a real problem, especially as a triple option team trying to play with a deficit, just not really ever going to work. But now we have this North Texas team also with 1 conference loss. They have the head-to-head over Navy already. Memphis is the only other team at 4-1. I think it's kind of Memphis, North Texas, and everyone else at this point. I'm pretty impressed with this Mean Green and Drew Mestemaker. 2 weeks ago, he had 600 yards passing. I mean, this kid's legit. What'd you see here?
One thing for North Texas, probably their best defensive game so far this year. I mean, they've been putting up scores that are looking like basketball scores this year so far. So that's another important point to kind of highlight there is because they've been in some shootouts, but much more improved defensively on Saturday. And I'm kind of right there with you. I think I like this North Texas team a lot. I think they could definitely make some more noise the rest of the way here.
Man, their schedule's easy.
Uh-huh.
They've got UAB, Rice, and Temple. Yeah. And that's not the bottom of the conference, but for reference, Memphis has Tulane this week, huge Friday night game. East Carolina next. Their last 3 games are Tulane, East Carolina, and Memphis. So that's immediately 2 of the top 3 or 4 teams in the conference. And plus, East Carolina only has 1 loss too. I cut that off at North Texas, but below them, you still have South Florida, Tulane, and East Carolina all have 1 loss in this conference. There's a lot of great games coming up in the American. Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Did I bet anything in this conference?
I bet the over at North Texas Navy. Didn't come through.
I did not have eyes on that game. Did you see anything?
Not really. No, again, North Texas had a much more improved defense this week.
Oh, I bet Temple. That's a game. Yeah, Temple got absolutely boat raced by East Carolina.
One game I will point out, I had UTSA on Thursday against Tulane, and that did come through. That was a huge win at home for UTSA. One of the best teams in the country at pressuring the quarterback, and they came out with a big win Thursday night.
Yeah, it's crazy how putting a spy on Jake Retzlaff will really change what they can do offensively, because when you 100%. Ask him to drop back and pass, it's not always pretty. In the Sun Belt, not a big game or a big week for games in the Sun Belt. Arkansas State Troy was probably the largest one on paper, and Arkansas State gets a victory that moves them all the way to 4-1 in conference. And I don't think the perception with Arkansas State is any good right now, largely because they just got blasted by P4 teams in non-conference. But quietly, the Sun Belt West, you're sitting there with Southern Miss at 4-0, Troy at 4-1, Arkansas State at 4-1, clearly just got the head-to-head in that game. Pretty interesting for them. The East, it's James Madison's world, and we're just living in it. They're 5-0 there. Coastal Carolina came up with a huge win on Thursday night, moving to 4-1, leaving Old Dominion and Marshall at 2-2, kind of bringing up the rear. This is a fun conference the rest of the way. And, I mean, James Madison has a legitimate chance to make the college football playoff with how much chaos has been going on in the American. They are undefeated in conference. Their only loss is to a good Louisville team, and they covered that spread. I don't know, man. I'm kind of interested in some James Madison stuff.
You know, it's interesting because I was actually going to place James Madison future at the beginning of the season. They were my pick to make the playoff from the G5 this year, but incredibly impressed with them. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw them in the rankings for the playoff come Tuesday.
I don't know how, obviously I don't watch the ranking shows. I probably should just for purposes of this video, but do they only have one G5 representative, or do they show who else? They only do the one. Okay.
They have the one, but then they'll show they usually show who else is in the mix,
in the running or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So then they'll definitely be on there.
They'll have 8 to 10 teams usually on there.
Okay. The MAC. I know you bet Buffalo. They got to win. I still feel bad that your Pudge got beat so badly.
My Pudge got beat, man. I was It's too bad, but good win for Buffalo.
At least you had money on it, so it kind of eases the pain. You get that monetary gain, even though your darling Bowling Green drops another game. But Drew Pine didn't play the whole game. They were on a third stringer again at quarterback. This team, just without a competent quarterback, is sort of dead at this point. Only 3 yards per play for Bowling Green. Buffalo's a legit team, man. This team is not going to make any postseason noise, but they have a good chance to win the MAC. They're just behind Miami, Ohio, who's 4-0. Buffalo sits at 4-1, tied with Western Michigan. This is a fun conference at the top, and this Buffalo team's playing really well, especially their defense. As long as Taquan Roberson doesn't turn the ball over, this is a legit Buffalo team. Anything in the MAC?
Nothing else really. I am excited though for Maction to start this week. So Tuesday we're going to get some midweek Maction.
A lot of MAC teams were. Yeah, that's why the MAC had a slow week this week. They always do, the bye before they go to Tuesday games. So most of them were off. And there is a huge game on Tuesday night this week. Miami, Ohio, and Ohio. Those are two teams in the top 4 of the standings. Both of them are 1 loss or fewer. Miami, Ohio at 4-0 in conference. Ohio at 3-1. I believe it's a 3-point spread, maybe 3.5. But that's going to be a huge game for determining the outlook in the MAC. But I'm really interested in betting Miami, Ohio in that game. I'm asking you all these questions like I should just have them pulled up. I think Miami, Ohio is catching 3.5, man. I might trigger on this.
I might as well. I like them a lot the rest of the way forward in the MAC. I really do.
So I already did this game. I'm going to look and see what the model made. If I did it, I just go back and make sure there's no one in the model that's, hurt or something. Yeah, make this Miami, Ohio -1.5, man.
And if we look at the MACs, we have Miami, Ohio sitting there 4-0, Buffalo 4-1, Western Michigan 4-1, Ohio is your 3-1 team. Certainly could see a lot of chaos here going forward, especially with these crazy midweek games.
I think Miami, Ohio is the best team.
Yeah.
Man, you'll have an answer by the end of the show whether I take this or not. But last conference on the screen here is the Mountain West. Fresno State beats up on Boise State. And I didn't have eyes on this game. It's a hard one to get eyes on anyway, as late as these games are. But I was surprised by the outcome. Even though I've not really been a Boise backer, this loss really put San Diego State in the driver's seat of the conference. And E.J. Warner didn't play in this game. I think he might have gotten benched. Maybe you know that answer better than I do. But Conklin started the game for Fresno State. I know Maddox Madsen got hurt in the contest, and apparently this Cutforth guy really just can't play at all for Boise. But my goodness, San Diego State might win this conference, man.
They certainly might. Yeah.
That's a gritty team too.
They're tough.
They play defense. Their quarterback's limited. It's the Michigan transfer, Jaden Denegal. I believe I forget who they play this week. I'll look it up quick, but I don't really see any way you're getting an upset for like a conference championship. I do think it's still probably Boise, San Diego State at this point, but New Mexico is kind of interesting after their upset win. Anything in the Mountain West, I'll just open it up to you entirely.
Nothing else really. I mean, I did bet Hawaii at the end of the night, and that didn't come through. And that was a tough game for them. Was really disappointed with that performance. But San Jose State a lot better than I anticipated going into that one. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. We should be seeing a San Diego State, Boise State 1-2 here going forward.
I bet the under in that Hawaii game. That was a disaster. It wasn't even close.
Disaster.
San Diego State is on the island this week. They're traveling out to face Hawaii, who's a pretty decent team in this conference. Like, there are opportunities for underdogs to come out of nowhere. Hawaii would be one of them. Dropping that game to San Jose definitely didn't help them, but they're not dead. UNLV is still interesting. They're kind of kicking around. They took a bad loss this week. And New Mexico with Eck, they're a pretty good program. I think they're probably not live unless there's some sort of upset or something for them really to make noise here. San Diego State, the rest of the way, they play on the island. They have the Boise head-to-head next week. It's at home. Then they play San Jose and New Mexico to end. So they look great right now. This is a hard schedule the rest of the way. I did not realize just off the top of my head they play basically all 4, maybe 3 of the top 4 teams in this conference in their last 4 games. It's going to be hard.
Yeah, but I kind of touching on the Mountain West still with New Mexico. They've done such a nice job this year, which is a team that some thought last year was one of the worst FBS teams ever in terms of their talent on their roster. But yeah, X done a nice job. I'm looking forward to how this conference shapes up here because again, we do have San Diego State and Boise State at the top here, but I mean those two lost teams can certainly make some noise here going forward.
If I were to pick one, it would be New Mexico still. They play Colorado State, Air Force, and San Diego State. So there's that head-to-head at the end of the year, potential opportunity to get some wins back. But otherwise, I think they should probably beat up Colorado State and Air Force pretty badly. They're on a bye this week. Boise, tricky schedule for them. San Diego State this week. Then they have Colorado State at home, Utah State. You think they're probably coming out of that with one loss at worst. So I still think Boise has the best path to the conference championship if you wanted to place a future or something like that. Conference USA, don't have them on the graphic, but they're now moving back to Saturdays as the MAC comes and takes over the Tuesday and Wednesday slots. Kennesaw and Jacksonville State are at the top of this conference, both 4-0. Western Kentucky's right behind them at 5-1. They played a lot of extra games because they played on week 0. Liberty and Missouri State are both 3-1. I could be talked into taking a Liberty future because they still only have one loss. A lot of their losses were incurred earlier in the season or when they had their backup quarterback playing. Ethan Vasco got hurt for a period of time. So I'm interested in Liberty. Anything in this conference?
So it's interesting with Kennesaw. I'm actually 0-3 betting against them this year. So I will definitely change my tune with that going forward. Much improved team from last year. Missouri State's actually interesting because it's their first year in the FBS, but they're actually ineligible for the postseason this year. But with that being their first year this year, they've been incredibly impressive, competitive, winning some tough games here, some tough close games. But I would probably lean towards Jacksonville State if I'm thinking any futures right now.
You should not be 0-3 betting against Kennesaw. That UTEP game was a complete. I mean, roughing the passer at the end of that game was absolutely outlandish. That should have been a cover. I will not hear you say you should be 3-0 betting them. And like Kennesaw is good. Kennesaw beat my Red Wolves. Pretty good team. I agree with you on Jacksonville State. I like that team a lot. My only worry is when they get down in games, they're like a glorified triple option offense. Can Creel actually throw the ball at any point in time? He's amazing as a runner. He looks inept as a passer. But when you're beating teams and you're playing with a lead, you don't have to throw the ball. So that is in their back pocket at least. Only 2-loss team kind of kicking around is La Tech. I think they're probably dead. Again, if I were to pick a team maybe a little further down the standings, it would be Liberty. Let's open this up. Anything else future-wise? I'll just let you talk about whatever you want. Heisman, futures next week. Go for it.
Fun week overall again. I actually laid down a couple FCS plays this past week. One actually I liked was Idaho. One thing I think that's really important, because for one, these lines don't come out until usually the morning of, right? So you're not really able to make decisions earlier in the week on a lot of these games. But Idaho is a 6.5-point dog playing Northern Arizona Friday night. Northern Arizona 21st in the country in the polls there, which again doesn't necessarily matter. Again, especially for a team like Idaho, they had 2 one-score losses against Power 4 teams. So it's pretty hard to look at that and be like, okay, I'm automatically just going to bet Northern Arizona, which I feel like, especially looking at these rankings, a lot of people end up doing. But yeah, Idaho is a great play. Idaho's got a great running back, Elijah Cummings. He's definitely undersized if we're looking at Division I running backs, but he had a phenomenal game, over 100 total yards. Caught a touchdown pass out of the backfield as well. But FCS can be a profitable spot. It can be very profitable, but you just have to pay close attention again, day of, look at the lines, and then take a peek at their records. You know what I mean? Again, records aren't necessarily everything in the FCS. They can be very inflated. Again, especially if you are playing a lot of those Power 4 teams at the beginning of the year. But yeah, certainly a good spot there. Montana's been a good spot this year so far. I think I'm 5-1 with them against the spread this year. So that's been another spot that I've paid some pretty close attention to there as well.
Yeah, FCS is really profitable if you know what you're doing. The problem is I don't. So you're the guy I listen to when it comes to FCS. I don't have the resources to get in the weeds with some of these teams.
And
But
they're horrible sometimes with injuries. Like finding injury reports on some of these teams is very hard, especially
I
a
can
lot of these
imagine.
last minute decisions.
It's hard even on FBS teams, let alone
Mm-hmm.
FCS teams. For look aheads for me, that we mentioned there's a lot of really good games. Funny enough, the ones I bet are none of them so far. I took Akron against UMass. I took UNLV minus a 5.5 against that dead Colorado State team who fired their coaches and on the third string quarterback. I took an under 46 in Florida, Kentucky. Both those teams playing at a really slow pace. Kentucky's outside the top 100. Florida's not far ahead. Both teams, the strength of them, their defense, both teams a little challenged at quarterback right now with Cutter Bully and Lagway. And I don't know who Lagway is going to throw to at this point. Losing Dallas Wilson, that's a disaster of a receiving corps. Last one I took was an over in East Carolina and Charlotte at 55.5. East Carolina is going to play at the speed of light. Their defense is awful, and their quarterback is surprising me even to this day when he plays more competitive teams. Their offense seems to be able to score on just about anyone. They're going to play fast, and they're going to throw the ball over the top. Only reservation I have is, can Charlotte really keep up with their backup quarterback? I don't know, but it's 55.5. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing to see East Carolina get most of that themselves. But that's where I'm sitting at right now. There are a lot of fun games. Is there anything that you wanted to just talk about quickly before we bounce?
No, overall gonna be a monster slate this coming weekend. I do think that Texas Tech BYU game is going to be the best game in that conference all year. I really do.
Agreed. Give me a look ahead on Oregon, Iowa.
So, I've been thinking about this a lot the past couple of weeks because, again, both teams are coming off a bye. Playing at Kinnick is always going to be one of the hardest environments. I'm not just going to be someone to come out and say Iowa's just going to boat race this team at all, right? This is going to be a very hard game. This is also a program game for the Hawkeyes, too. You know what I mean? You have teams like Indiana, Oregon coming into the Big Ten. This is a team, with Iowa that wants to still be considered upper echelon of the Big Ten. So, you got to come in, you got to come compete. I really do think they have a good chance. It's going to come down to a couple of things here. The run game, Moulton's got to get going. And then 2, how is Gronowski going to look? In that Penn State game, he had a phenomenal game, especially on the ground, but he does still look like he is limping. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And again, I think if the Hawkeyes can go out and win in the trenches, I think they could be just fine against this Oregon team.
On paper, they have the trench advantage. It's only a 6-point spread. So I was far from being, an afterthought in this game. There's a very real chance they win it. So I'm certainly excited for that one. I agree with you. I think the Texas Tech game is the best one. Just kind of sucks, man. A lot of these games have sort of had someone popped the balloon in the air is leaking out. Like Alabama, LSU with Brian Kelly fired, Clemson playing Florida State, both of those teams. I mean, both of them are fighting for a bowl right now, which is not anything I ever thought I would say. And then you kind of just run down the list. Missouri, Texas A&M was supposed to be a great game until Missouri lost their quarterback. So maybe not the week we thought on paper, but honestly, some of these G5 games have a lot of really just conference equity at stake. Like Southern Miss plays Arkansas State. That's going to be an awesome game. In the Sun Belt, we just mentioned the Tuesday night game between Miami, Ohio. That's an excellent one in the MAC. So if you're not really interested by some of these power games, I would encourage you to check out maybe some teams that could be playing for a conference championship in the Sun Belt, the MAC, and some of these other leagues. But that'll be it for me. Any last thoughts?
Oh, no, that's it for me as well.
All right, guys, thank you for watching. If you have any requests for games this week, let me know. Otherwise, thank you again. We will see you all again shortly. But until then, good luck. We will see you guys next time.